This episode is brought to you by Good Good. Born in Iceland, made in the EU, Good Good offers better for you pantry staples. Naturally derived, non GMO, low carb, and low calorie, Good Good jams and spreads are perfect for anyone looking to cut down on sugar without sacrificing taste. Find them on Amazon and in stores across the US, Europe, Canada, and more. Learn more at goodgoodbrand.com. You're listening to the Speaking Tongues podcast. I'm your host, El Charisse. Each week, I sit down to a conversation with multilinguals where we discuss and celebrate language, life, and culture through our own perspectives. Episode 145, Speaking Icelandic. Welcome back to another episode of Speaking Tongues. I'm here today with Óskar. Óskar is the Chief Icelandic Language Coach at Speak Viking. Óskar has been teaching Icelandic for over 10 years. When not teaching, you can find him spending time with his daughter, going to the movies. He's a bit of a human IMDB and loves soaking in everything about the art of filmmaking, marveling and exploring the gorgeous and dramatic Icelandic nature. Occasionally, he will cool off with an ice plunge, sometimes in the Atlantic Ocean. That's very brave of you, Oscar. But he is frequently warming up with a great cup of coffee. Thank you so much for being with me today, Oscar. How are you?
I'm excellent, thank you. How are you?
I'm excited. I'm so pumped to get into this conversation about Icelandic with you. I like to start each episode with the same question, which is what is your first language and which languages have you learned to speak?
First language, Icelandic. Languages I've learned to speak, English.
Were you exposed to any other languages while you were growing up in Iceland?
Yeah, exposed is such a loaded word. So we have Danish kind of in the background, a little bit, but primarily, the culture that we have is Icelandic, and then we have so much pop culture coming from America that English just sort of by default became a bigger thing than
Mhm.
Danish used to be. But Danish is sort of like percolating a little bit in the background, but it's Icelandic, English, and then Danish.
So how so? I mean, is it something where, Danish is a bit in the background, so that makes me wonder, as you're saying that US English culture is coming into Iceland more, is it a generational divide that you see where people, maybe the older generation are more, they have more of that Danish as their second or as their background language, and maybe the younger people are more English focused, or how do you notice that breaking down at all?
Yeah, that's definitely the case where it's sort of like the older generation are more geared towards Danish or tuned into Danish because Denmark was the last kingdom to rule Iceland, and we had a connection, still do to a certain extent, I think, where people have the possibility of moving to Denmark, going to school there, and it's affordable. There is a bit of a love-hate thing going on,
Mm.
you have Great Britain and then you have France, and there's a love-hate thing going on. You have the US and you have Great Britain, and there's a love-hate thing going on there. And our nemesis, for lack of a better word, is Denmark. So there is, a lot of people are really into Denmark and Danish things. And then sometimes we're a little bit like, yeah, we don't know about those guys.
How does that, I'm before I get to Icelandic, I'm curious because how does that break down? Is it like there are, we and I like that you made that comparison. So like the US and the UK, like we make fun of them in the UK, they make fun of us, but it's all lighthearted. There's in TV shows or in music or things like that. So what does that look like between Iceland and Denmark? Like what's the dynamic?
Well, a lot of it is the language. So we make fun of the way that they speak.
Mm.
And the most popular joke is that they speak as if they have a potato in their mouth. And I'm
Hmm.
not going to attempt to do that justice here, but listeners, watchers, you can look up. Danish people speaking and, judge for yourself.
Tell us about the Icelandic language. Talk to us a bit about how the language is constructed. How are we forming sentences? Are there any languages that are similar to it? And tell us any features of the language that you find interesting or compelling.
Yeah, great question. So I threw out this question to some of the people that follow me on Facebook, follow Speak Viking on Facebook, and I asked, how would you describe how the Icelandic language is constructed? And it was a variation on I wouldn't. In very basic terms, it's sort of like subject, verb, object.
Okay.
If we're just going to be really basic about it. So in order to make a simple sentence in Icelandic, you could say something like, ég les bók. I read a book. But the origins of it have a very strong connection to Old Norse, which is to say the way that the Vikings used to speak, basically. Which is not to say that Icelandic is Old Norse, but it's close enough that we're able to understand some of the ancient texts and the sagas in the way that it was written, and we're able to recognize words. But when you jump over into the Scandinavian countries like Norway, Denmark, Sweden, those guys have a trickier time of it. If you want to get a taste of what this looks like, you can look up a video that my friend Norbert did on his Ecolinguist YouTube channel. And Jackson Crawford is the one hosting it. And it's me, and it's guys from Norway and guys from Denmark. And we're all trying to understand things in Old Norse.
Hmm.
And just to get an idea of what this looks like, what this means, this connection of Icelandic to Old Norse, I think the best thing to do is to check out that video. But to go back to Icelandic, it's a little bit of like a tribe that is discovered modern day that's been completely isolated for such a long time that you might have a connection to an ancient language through this modern day tribe of people. And that's kind of what you have with Iceland. Um, Very isolated uh, people for centuries in the middle of the Atlantic. So the language has not changed that much, whereas Norwegian, Danish, Swedish, they're all in such close proximity to each other and other countries that, the languages just they change. And so, the what you said about like what is another something similar, Faroese is pretty similar to Icelandic. And
Okay.
it's yeah,
There are similarities there with Faroese, with Icelandic. Are they mutually intelligible?
it's pretty close.
Okay.
It is pretty close, but it's sort of like what do I want to say? Like Mad Libs, where you might have like a sentence and then one of the words in the sentence just makes no sense whatsoever. That's where it gets kind of funny sometimes. Off the top of my head, I can't remember one in particular, but it is the subject of some funny encounters where you might have a Faroese speaker saying something in Faroese. It sounds like something completely different in Icelandic.
That's interesting. I gotta find someone who speaks Faroese to talk about their side of the story.
Absolutely, yeah. I would love to hear that and see that. I'll mention one thing. There was a series of Domino's ads that they did.
Domino's
Um,
Pizza?
Domino's
Okay.
Pizza that they did for Domino's Pizza in Iceland, where one of the people working at Domino's was somebody from the Faroe Islands. And so when he heard, what was it? Like mushrooms. Somebody said mushrooms in Icelandic. We need mushrooms, mushrooms on the pizza. Or what he heard was like sponges. So he was clipping up like a piece of sponge and putting it on the pizza.
Oh, okay. Do you know what those words were?
Ooh, it was something like I want to say it was like sveppir, because sveppir is mushrooms plural in Icelandic, and that was
Okay.
close enough, I think, to the word for sponge in Faroese.
Huh. I'm a little sad that you guys have Domino's pizza in Iceland because it's not our best.
Yeah, I know somebody online primarily, and he's a big pizza aficionado, and I'll make jokes about, having the wonderful culinary experience of Domino's, where he's making his pizza posts, and he'll just go like unfriended, get out of here. Yeah, Domino's is very basic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, anyways, we're not here to talk about Domino's or pizza, which I could talk about pizza all day, but we're not going to do that. I would love to know, when people who are learning Icelandic, and I know that I've seen on my end, just personally, I've seen a lot of people, I'm saying a lot, but I've seen maybe more than I anticipated seeing people who are learning Icelandic who have interest in learning the Icelandic language. And as you're a teacher and you are regularly with students, I imagine of all levels, what is that experience like? And, the people who are coming to you who are learning Icelandic, are they in Iceland? Number one, but also what are some of the motivations that you've come across for the learners of Icelandic for wanting to learn this language?
Yeah, great question. One of the things is this stuff back here. This is a big gravitational pull for people coming to Iceland. And I think that's what gets people a lot of times is the nature. And then they hear the sound of Icelandic, and that really like captures them because it sounds so beautiful, you know. And I'm not just uh praising my own language. This is what I hear, so many times from people is that they just love the sound of it, that it sounds beautiful. And on top of that, you have music, which is really like a huge source of export culturally that we have, considering how many people there are in Iceland, which is less than 400,000.
Mhm.
Um, but the students I teach are sometimes people in Iceland and sometimes abroad. More often than not, I'm teaching people from abroad. And it depends whether sometimes people have never been to Iceland and they've just been fans for forever. And sometimes people have been multiple times to Iceland and they've started coming here before I was even born. So that's fascinating to encounter. Um, and people are at all different levels and they're doing it for different reasons. Sometimes it's primarily a hobby and it's sort of like doing a puzzle, like an awesome mind puzzle. And sometimes it's for purposes of moving here. Sometimes it's for love. And yeah, sometimes it's something to do with just, like a really big challenge that people have set out for themselves that
Mhm.
they want to accomplish.
Mhm. Have you noticed with people, I imagine from so many different backgrounds, and they're learning Icelandic, whether they're in Iceland or not, what are some of the common things that people struggle with when they're learning Icelandic, or some of the common things that maybe things that you find yourself reminding people that they and I'm asking this question, I'm all over the place. I'm sorry. I'm asking this question because I remember your video about rolling R's in Icelandic. And I know that rolling R's in many languages can be difficult for some people, or it can be challenging. Let's not say difficult, can be challenging for some people. But are there things like that that you feel or that you've noticed as a teacher, things that you are reminding students that they have to do this? Is it pronunciation, or is it grammar, or is it anything else that you can really think of?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I have kind of I have a bit of a pain in the ass answer to it. And I think the most challenging thing with this, as with anything else in life, actually, is self-sabotage. So that's, my smart alecky answer to your very thoughtful question. I could say a million things like it's pronunciation. Pronunciation is really hard. Or it's the grammar. The grammar is really hard. Or it's just the fact that, if people aren't living here, and even when they are living here, immersion is difficult because Icelandic people are not the most open.
Okay.
Um, so all of those things are challenging. At the end of the day, it's kind of like, you versus you in this challenge of learning Icelandic. And there are so many quotes that pop into my mind. One is the one from Dune, I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer, which is this like iconic line from Dune. Another thing that I think about is this character, Nick Miller on New Girl, said one time, "The enemy is the inner me. The enemy is the inner me." And yeah, it's sort of like, that saying, wherever you go, there you are.
There you are. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I'm so appreciative that you dropped a new girl quote in this conversation. And especially Nick Miller of all characters. He's like the anti-hero, but you just can't help but root for him. And he just says some things that are like, what? But he's right in that, in light of that. And you have students who are challenging themselves, or for whatever reason they're learning Icelandic. How do you as a teacher motivate your students? Are there life hacks that you give them? Are there quotes similar to how you gave just now? Like, how do you keep your students motivated? How do you keep them, I don't want to say keep them in line, but how do you keep them focused on their goals of learning Icelandic? Tell us a bit about some of your methods in that way.
Well, I heard when you were reading the question, I heard you have students that are challenging, and I went, yeah, yeah, I do. I do. They're very challenging. They have all these questions, and I'm like, why all these questions? You're very challenging. Um,
But you love them.
yes, yes.
Okay.
Caveat, I love them.
Okay.
No, but yeah, that's a fantastic question. And I think, the trick about motivation, it's sort of like it has to be an inside job, but also there's a bit of like I have this feeling about motivation. I've sort of changed my mind over the years about motivation, and I kind of think that motivation is crap.
Mm,
Because you can be really motivated to do something, sitting on your couch, and then when it comes time to do it, you can be not motivated, and then you go, "Well, I'm not motivated, so I'm not going to do it." But what I go back to is having fun with it. And so what I notice a lot of times is I show up there, I'm teaching them Icelandic, and it's fun, or I have it in my mind that we're gonna have fun.
mhm.
And people might be a little bit wary, going like, yeah, but isn't this like supposed to be like school? And school wasn't fun. So, when are you gonna be like super serious and give me grades and tell me, no, no, no,
Mm,
it was bad. It was really bad. You need to be a good student. You'll get the star and an A plus if you
yeah,
do that.
right.
So I think that's a huge part of it, the fun, just like having fun with it, which I try my darndest to
Mhm.
evoke, to to make it a space where people can have fun with it.
Mhm.
Another thing about learning Icelandic is to give people these little hacks, these life hacks, you could call them, about learning the language, sort of making it more part of their life. And one of the things I happened upon not too long ago was stall words or pause words in conversation. And you might be familiar with this in English, but I think a lot of times it might be things like, Uh, or, well, sometimes it's, you know, like is a big one. And we have these things in Icelandic too. And so you might be able to say to somebody, heyrðu, which means listen. But what it really means is like, heyrðu means like, I'm gonna say something. It's not quite ready yet. It's coming. Don't worry about it. And it's like these cues, these social cues of like, we're having a conversation. I need a moment. Heyrðu. And those are things that I think are helpful to people too.
Mhm.
These little things. And it's not only about having a conversation, but it's also a cultural thing. Like you're letting the person that you're speaking to know that you understand this cultural tidbit.
Right, right.
Yeah.
I think that's so valuable as a language learner because a lot of times when you're learning to express yourself in another language, I think you're so focused on getting it right, getting the right tense, getting the right vocabulary word, and also being understood that you forget about those filler words and how they, I think a lot of people online like to market it as, these are native speaker things that you should be aspiring to. But I don't think that it's something about being a native speaker or not. But I think it takes a lot of pressure off of you when you can use those filler words, you can use those words that people don't really teach those. So you hear them, you learn them through context, and then you get so proud of yourself when you realize, oh shoot, like I actually used a filler word when I was looking for my thought and I didn't feel overwhelmed because I couldn't find the right vocabulary word. I couldn't find the right thing. And I think it's brilliant that you're teaching your students to use them, to utilize those, because it must be such a confidence booster for them.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, 100%. And you're absolutely right. These are things that are not necessarily taught, and they might even be frowned upon a little bit,
Mhm.
either by teachers or maybe just by people learning. Like they think, oh, I need to be able to speak perfectly right off the bat. But I think what's so great about something like Heru is that Icelandic people do this all the time,
Mhm.
you know. So it's not like I mean, it is a dumbed down version of Icelandic, but it's not in the spirit of like it's not without context. It's not like you're speaking some lesser form of Icelandic because Icelandic people do it.
Right.
And if you do it with somebody who's a native Icelandic speaker, they're gonna know, oh, this thing, I know what this is. And it's gonna make the encounter less awkward.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad that you are putting that in the category of social cues as well, because we so often learn languages without those social cues. And I can imagine, as you said, with 400,000 people, you're not going everywhere and encountering Icelandic people, Icelandic speakers. Um, and your best chance is probably to get on a plane and go to Iceland to actually encounter this. So, but I just think in general, we don't often get that context from teachers about, socially, here's what you say, or if you do this in a social situation, it's going to carry this connotation. So, having that and having someone explain that, to you as a learner is so incredibly valuable. Just switching gears a little bit, I have a listener question. I actually have two listener questions, but we're going to break this up a little. Sarah is a listener of Speaking Tongues, and she is learning Icelandic. And she is the one who actually said, reach out to Oscar and see if he wants to be on this show. I would love to hear more about Icelandic from him. So I asked her if she had any questions for you, and she has two questions for you. And I'm going to ask the first one, which is, one of the recurring things people mention when discussing Icelandic language is how it's one of the only languages that has been relatively unchanged over time. i.e., it's almost the same language as Vikings spoke. I've heard many people cite this as their motivation to learn Icelandic. How does this linguistic connection to the past impact Icelandic culture today? Do the average Icelanders even care about being able to read ancient sagas?
Really good question from Sarah. Thank you, Sarah. I think that the sort of national identity of Icelanders is hugely connected to the language. And I mean, I can't speak for other nations in regards to this, but I know for Icelanders, Icelanders, the connection that we have to the language is huge. And it has to do with, how many people there are here that can read, how many people there are who have books published, and how many books there are published every year. And this heritage of the sagas that were preserved in a large part, in large part by Icelandic people, by, you know, either speaking of it, like carrying on the tradition, the stories verbally, or in the actual manuscripts that were preserved in Iceland.
Okay.
And I can jump forward and mention something that I was thinking about today. And this is there is an Icelandic mixed martial artist, and his name is Gunnar Nelson. Gunnar Gunny Nelson. And he's, the creme de la creme of Icelandic mixed martial artists. And his mixed martial artist mixed martial artist. His MMA gym is called Mjölnir, like
Mjolnir, like
Mjölnir.
the
There you
hammer,
go.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hammer of Thor.
right.
And in the gym, you'll see things from, ancient stories and stuff like that. So it's part of, it's not only about like advertising, but there are, you know, philosophies and things in that which have carried over, have a connection there. And I think it seems very apropos that somebody whose work is so high stakes and dramatic and life or death that, sayings and philosophies of warriors of the past, to have a connection to that, which is not only about aesthetics or advertising, but has to do with like who you are as a person in the modern day. I think that is something special.
Yeah. Something you mentioned a while ago that I wanted to come back to. You said that Icelanders are very protective of their language, and I know that um, there's some strictness about new words coming into the language and usage of words in Icelandic. And I would love to know how you see this happening. Are we mixing Icelandic and English? Like, tell us a bit about that situation.
Yeah, so there is something about speaking proper Icelandic, and so you might encounter people that have a wider variety of words that they use in their vocabulary. And then you might come across people that kind of use the same words over and over again, or they might use slang terms from English a bit more
Okay.
liberally than some others. Historically speaking, there has been a very strong sort of push towards maintaining Icelandic and not taking on words wholesale. Whereas you might see in Denmark, Norway, Sweden, sorry to like keep piling on those guys all day, but whatever. You might see a word like computer, and you'll see that like a variation on that word in Norway, Denmark, Sweden. But in Icelandic, they came up with a new word for computer. And this is sort of the example that you hear a lot when people hear about like Iceland and this tradition of maintaining the language. And if I'm not mistaken, computer in Icelandic, tölva, is this two words that come together, tala or tölur for numbers, and then völva, which is a sorceress.
A number counting sorceress?
Yeah, right? Really cool.
That's very cool.
To give you the flip side of that, where
Hmm.
we sort of get ourselves into trouble. And this is actually written about really fantastically in a book by Jón Gnarr, comedian and former mayor of the city of Reykjavik, and now a presidential candidate in the running for the next president of Iceland. He wrote a book and it was called like Óorð or like bad words. And it's words that he has beef with, you know. And you, there are quite a lot of words that we came up with for medical terms in Icelandic that have probably led to more confusion than any sort of like necessary preservation of language. And I can't really think of a worse space where you want to have any confusion than in the medical field.
Absolutely.
So, like, good, computer. Let's make a new word for that. Bad. These are words that everybody uses everywhere in the world for medical terms. Not let's not come up with new ones because we just want to, make people healthy and well again.
Hmm.
There's another thing of just the sort of proudness of like we want to keep the language and then like a complete lack of any sort of planning or forethought as to how to do that. And there is not any sort of like clear plan for how to teach people that are coming here Icelandic. They sort of have to figure it out on their own. And, people when they move to Norway, Denmark, Sweden, they have programs that just kind of line stuff up where it's like you do this, you do that, and then you know the language and you can get out there into society and
Hmm.
communicate. We, I think, in Iceland say, well, you should learn the language and good luck. Yeah.
What's up with that? Like, why?
Well, it kind of ties back to the unofficial Icelandic motto, which is Þetta reddast. And Þetta reddast is this sort of mentality or philosophy. And what it means is the phrase, it means it's going to work out. And it has a lot to do with the weather in Iceland and the way that it's very chaotic. And it makes it kind of hard sometimes to plan ahead because the plan keeps changing because the weather keeps
Right.
changing. So you don't know what the hell's going on.
Right.
And sometimes it can be really beautiful in that we come up with solutions on the fly, but at the same time, not so beautiful when there are things that are like persistently a problem and we don't come up with ways of solving them. Just to mention too, like all these things that I'm mentioning, huge sweeping generalizations of, places and people that look like so many things,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. As with everything, definitely not expecting you to be the spokesperson for all of Iceland.
that's good.
I should have said that in the beginning. We're speaking very generally, but obviously this is not about everybody, and it's definitely not a put down of the beautiful people of Iceland. Um, I have another question from Sarah, and I think you touched a little bit on this earlier, but she wants to know with English being taught in school and the pervasiveness of US media, as well as technological challenges, i.e., a lack of Icelandic subtitles and audio on major streaming platforms, and Apple not having Icelandic as an option on any of their devices. That's news to me. I didn't know that. But she wants to know, do the younger generations of Icelanders default to English, whether speaking with friends or consuming media? And are you more likely to hear young Icelanders speaking Icelandic or English?
Hmm. Well, I don't know the specifics of like all the streaming platforms, obviously, but there there's one platform that does really well, and that's Disney Plus. And you have their access to, I believe, like a huge portion of the animated films in Icelandic. And also a lot of times there's the possibility of Icelandic subtitles, or some of the time, I should say. But that's, the animated films is so huge because the way that those characters speak is so clear and so well enunciated and so colorful that this is like a really huge benefit of anybody trying to learn Icelandic, I believe, and maybe like a really untapped source. I'm just, putting the Disney name out there. I don't know if enough people know about Disney, and just I want them to do well.
I hear that they're just starting out and they're, trying to make a name for themselves. So I really appreciate you plugging them for free here.
They're plucky upstarts, but I think they're gonna do well. The thing is, like, I don't spend that much time around young Icelanders, like super young Icelanders, outside of, my daughter who's 4.
Mhm.
So it's hard for me to say exactly what the status is, but I think the smartphone usage and the prevalence of people using things like TikTok and Instagram and these, like, reels and videos that are like crack to people, they can just like get completely sucked in. And if people of my generation are having an issue with it, you know, where we lived in a world pre-internet and now post-internet, I think kids that grow up in a world where the internet is just like always there, the temptation is so strong to just get completely sucked in to that. I do notice that kids will sometimes sl slip into English, but I don't think that this is like a thing that's completely uncommon in this moment in time, because that's always kind of been the case with
Okay.
teenage culture in Iceland.
Hmm.
What I would say is a very positive marker for Icelandic not uh, evaporating into the ether and turning into Northern Lights is that uh, Icelandic rappers primarily rap in Icelandic and not English.
Yes. Huh.
Yeah.
How's that? How's the Icelandic hip hop scene?
It's very strong,
Okay.
and it's vibrant. And I think one of my favorite wordsmiths of the day is a rapper, and his name is MC Gauti, and his lyrics are sometimes Oscar Wildean in their puns and their humor. And I just think he's a national treasure.
Hmm. Are Icelandic rappers rapping about the same things that a lot of other rappers around the world are rapping about? Um, Money, excess, women, crime.
Well, maybe all of those things,
Okay.
minus the crime in Iceland.
Okay.
But yeah, like, yeah, there's a group here, and their name is Ulfur Ulfur, which is like Wolf Wolf,
Hmm.
and it's a duo. It's
Okay.
two guys, and they rap about stuff that's kind of existential.
Okay.
And I'm not gonna get super deep into that because I don't know enough of their catalog to do that. But when I listen to some of their songs, it's like, oof, this is like heavy stuff that they're rapping about, not just, the bling and the money and the women.
Hmm.
Women. Um, not definitely not any other word.
Right. Right.
And with MC Gauti, uh, he's I don't know, he's kind of rapping about some of these things, but then he kind of turns it on his head and makes it kind of a it makes it funny, you know,
Hmm.
which is refreshing. And also a little bit like I mean, it's not the same thing, but it's you have somebody like him, you have somebody like Eminem, where they're not always like, oh, hey, look at me, I'm so awesome. Sometimes it's like, hey, look at me, I'm kind of effed up a little bit, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't expect you to be an expert on hip hop, but I am curious now in the respect of knowing how Iceland is about their word usage and their, using the language. How are the rappers playing with words, number one? And I guess the second part of that question would be, what's the temperature of the Icelandic people who are very pure and want their language to be passed down in a certain way or expressed in a certain way? Is there any type of backlash or finger wagging about about hip hop in Icelandic?
Well, I think you almost sort of, you want that in hip hop, I think, to sort of distance yourself from the previous generation and to do something, yeah, completely off the wall with
Hmm.
it. But no, I think people appreciate it. Uh, I think people appreciate the preservation of Icelandic, no matter how it looks like. And I think in hip hop in Iceland, it's very colorful, it's very playful, it's happy. I think people are feel good about it. But also, I should mention, I'm a little bit offended that you would say that, you wouldn't expect me to be a expert on hip hop. I would think
Are
somebody
you?
somebody, from New York would definitely understand that, a person from Iceland is obviously, very well versed in hip hop.
Well, that's not what I meant. What I meant is you very well may be the expert on hip hop in Iceland.
I'm not, but
Okay.
thank you.
I
Thank you though.
just I just didn't want you to think that I was expecting this expert level, etymological answer about how the rappers are using their art to craft these new tantalizing words in Iceland. Like, no, I don't. You can speak as a fan. You don't have to speak as a PhD in Icelandic hip hop. Like,
Hmm. No, I'm just teasing. I mean, it's kind of bizarre that we even have rap as a thing in Iceland because it's so far removed from, the origins of it in the US, from, people living in circumstances that are, shall we say, economically challenged.
mhm,
And just the explosion of creativity that came with the invention of hip hop. But yeah, there are new expressions and things that have been sort of, yeah, they're able to take the language and kind of turn it on its ear. And that's so great about Icelandic rap, I think.
yeah.
The thing that kind of comes to mind is there's a line in one of MC Gauti's songs where he's talking about it has to do with like how much money that he's making, uh, the song in general, and then he says, like, I go down to the pond with some bread, looking at ducks. But the way that he says looking at ducks is endur skoðandi. And when you pull those things apart, you have endur, ducks, and then skoðandi, looking at. But when you put those things together, you have endurskoðandi, which is accountant in Iceland. in Icelandic. So it's those sort of little okay, that's very clever.
That's fun. I know that you talked to me a bit about self-development and self-care. And I maybe hip hop is a part of that for you, which would be awesome. But I'd love to know how these principles have become a part of your life and how one is likely to adopt self-care and self-development into their lifestyles in Iceland.
Yeah, well, obviously first step hip hop,
Okay.
duh. But no, but no, I think self-expression through any art form, whether it be music or writing or macrame,
Mm,
anything. It can, having that time for yourself where it's not about doing chores or work or responsibilities, where it's just like, this is me time. It's huge. It's huge. I think one of the bigger things about self-care in Iceland that, what pops up in my mind when I think about self-care is our public pool culture.
aha. Okay.
And I think for a lot of people, when they hear public pool, they go like, "Ugh, yucky." The reality is, public pools in Iceland are just next level amazing. First of all, we have all this access to geothermal water,
Mm,
which makes it possible for us to heat not just the pools, but also the hot tubs year round, and it is not prohibitively expensive.
okay.
And there is also just something about the ritual of going to the pool for people in Iceland that has, it's a bit of a chicken or the egg thing. I don't know what came first, the pools or people's willingness and passion for going to the pools. But we have all these amazing pools in Iceland. Like basically every single town has its own pool, more or less. And then, you have the option of going there and you can swim, but you can also go into the hot tubs. And what happens in the hot tubs is kind of unique and special because Icelandic people, not the most talkative bunch in the world, but if you get them in the hot tub, they will talk your ear off.
I love that. Because it's toasty and warm and you're feeling cozy and you're opening up a bit.
It is kind of amazing that, outside of the pool, talking, not so much, but in the pool, talking, definitely, for sure.
Huh. What's the ritual? Is there a ritual?
For a lot of people, it's going and getting in a few laps of swimming, and then
Okay.
after that, going and soaking in the hot tubs. Oftentimes, there's also steam baths. And in recent years, what's becoming more and more prevalent is these ice baths where you can do the cold plunge.
You told us a bit earlier about your teaching Speak Viking. If there's anything else that you would like to mention about Speak Viking, tell us more about your work and most importantly, tell us where we can find you.
Thank you. So I've been teaching Icelandic for over a decade now, and it's been primarily one-on-one lessons. And what I've been doing recently is stuff on Instagram, and I've been more active there recently, posting just very simple things that you can follow along with, just short words and the pronunciation of the words. And also mixed in between that stuff, I try to do things that are funny, because I like doing that, and I think it kind of makes it more of a that's more of the kind of atmosphere I'm looking to create, like not super serious.
Yeah.
And yeah. Yeah, so people can find me on the Instagrams, they can find me on the YouTubes, the TikTok a little bit, and my website as well, speakviking.com. But there is also a new course that I'm working on currently, and it's gonna come out. fairly soon. So if you want to sort of stay posted on that, then you should definitely subscribe to the Speak Viking Instagrams.
Amazing. I'm going to add links to all of those platforms in the show notes for this episode so that people who are looking to find you, looking to work with you, or even take your new course, they can find you right away.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a quick question about food. And are there any things in Iceland that we're known for in the culinary way? Like, what are the Icelandic foods and beverages or snacks or anything like that that are very Icelandic, things that Iceland is known for?
So I think on the extreme spectrum, you have things like fermented shark that people have heard about
Mhm.
because that's kind of a nasty trick we play on tourists when they come here. We go like, "Yeah, you gotta try the fermented shark, yeah," and then do a shot. Ah, and so that's something that people may have heard about. That's where the drinking comes in handy. Yeah, that's sort of on the extreme side.
Okay.
And there are these, like old timey foods that are eaten on specific holidays in Iceland that, you know, are not maybe like pleasant trips, culinary trips to
Okay.
take, but they are interesting for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
But what we do have that is maybe more popular is stuff like the Icelandic hot dog, the pilsa. And
Yes.
this is like it looks like a traditional, hot dog that you've seen before, but the meat inside is from lamb.
Oh, it's a lamb hot dog, like a sausage essentially.
Yeah, like looks like a sausage, tastes like a sausage, but the meat is not from it's not pork or beef.
Hmm.
It's lamb.
What do we put on as toppings?
What we put, and these are all optional, but we put ketchup and we put on mustard, not the yellow type, but it's more of it's like a brown mustard,
Okay.
specifically Icelandic. And then we have crispy onions
Mm.
and we have raw onions, and then we have remulaði.
Remoulade. That sounds delicious. Two kinds of onions. Well, onions prepared in two different ways. I love onions, so I think that sounds delicious.
It wouldn't really be an Icelandic culinary event if we didn't have ice cream. And we have this insane fascination and obsession with ice cream. And we like to combine this oftentimes with taking a drive. So we go
Hmm.
out into
Hmm.
the car, we get ice cream, and then we drive around and maybe we look at the sunset.
What are the popular ice cream flavors?
A lot of times it's actually vanilla and it's this soft serve ice cream.
Okay.
And you can get dippings like they'll dip it in chocolate, they'll dip it in caramel, and then you can get all the sprinkles and stuff. And then we have something called bragðarefur, which is if you translate it directly, it's like flavor fox. And this is where you take ice cream and
Hmm.
you put all these different candies in it, like you get your pick, whether it's chocolate or licorice or strawberries, get that stuff in there, and then they put it in a mixer, and then you eat this stuff.
I've had Icelandic yogurt, so I can only imagine that Icelandic ice cream is the bomb.
It's so good.
I I've got to come to Iceland. Oscar, thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you so much, Elle, for having me.
I've
Appreciate
had
it.
such a blast chatting with you, and I don't remember the last time I laughed so much talking to a guest. I like to end each episode with the same question, if you will indulge me. Do you have any jokes, popular sayings, tongue twisters, cool slang words, idioms, words of wisdom, or words of advice in Icelandic to share and to teach us?
Great question. So one of the things that you could say when things are going haywire or everything is going wrong. You can say, allt að fara í skrúfuna? Allt að fara í skrúfuna? Is everything going into the screw? Meaning like the trawl or the net of the
Hmm.
fishing ship
Yeah.
is about to go into the screw of the ship. And so, translation, you're screwed when that happens.
Oh gosh. Oh my goodness. Teach me that one. Let's go. Can we go? I got my pencil out
Yeah,
because I need to
yeah,
write this phonetically.
yeah, yeah,
Can we go syllable by syllable?
sure.
Okay, I'm ready.
Hmm. Er
Er,
allt
allt,
af.
av,
So right
av,
there, you don't want to say not af, af,
av, av,
fara,
fara,
í,
í,
skrú,
skrú,
fu,
fö,
na. Er allt að fara í skrúfuna?
ir, ash, ash, at. Am I on the right street?
Don't worry,
Oh,
keep going.
fara, í, skrúfuna.
It's good. Let's try it one more time. I'll say it and then you say it back, okay?
Okay, okay.
Er
Er,
allt
allt,
að
að,
fara
fara,
í
í,
skrúfuna?
skrúfuna. I need some practice with
That was
Icelandic.
that was pretty damn impressive for the first try. Really good.
Thank you for your
Proud,
patience.
proud of you. Proud of you. It was very
Thank
good.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I hope that people listening practice along with me, practice along with us. Oscar, thank you so much again. And before I let you go, um, you're in Reykjavik and you have just been speaking with someone for a long time, but it's time to go home. It's time for you to go your separate ways. What is the best way in Icelandic to say goodbye?
What I usually do as a sign off, I think, yeah, you would say something like, gott að sjá þig, sjáumst seinna.
What does that mean?
Uh, Good to see you, and I'll see you later.
Okay. Should I try that one too?
Sure, yeah, go for it.
Okay.
Yeah. Gott
Gott
að
að
sjá
sjá
þig,
þig.
sjáumst.
What?
What is right? I'll do it. I'll break it up into two.
Okay.
Sjáumst
Sjá umst
seinna.
se na. I'm going to repeat after you one more time, and then that's it. And then I'm left with what I've got, and we'll work on it off the clock.
Okay. Okay. Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. One more time.
Yes, please.
Yo. Gott
Gott
að
að
sjá
sjá
þig,
þig.
sjáumst
Sjá umst
seinna.
na.
That was really good, Al.
Okay.
I'm not blowing smoke up your hiney at in the least. That was really good. That was really good. And this is worth it to watch for people. If you're just listening, you want to watch because we both look so silly and you'll enjoy watching us being silly. I promise.
Definitely. That
Yeah.
was probably the world's slowest goodbye, but I appreciate you taking the time to walk me and our listeners through it so that we're prepared for our trips to Iceland when we part ways with new friends. So,
Sloth goodbyes are my favorite.
the one when like your mom says put your coat on and then she's still there talking to her friends or your grandma for like 30 minutes and you're sweating to death. Like, come on, we could have anyway.
I've been there many times. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I will be talking to you soon and thank you so much again for this conversation.
Takk fyrir all.
Bye.
Bye bye.
New episodes of Speaking Tongues are available every Monday, 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and to like and share episodes with other language lovers just like ourselves.